Today we're going to talk about ventilation. As we all know, there's various types of ventilation. We have cross ventilation, positive pressure ventilation, and also vertical ventilation or roof ventilation. Today we're basically going to be talking about roof ventilation or vertical ventilation. Why do we ventilate? Of course, the primary reason for ventilation is saving of lives. If you can get the heat and smoke out of the structure, quite often you can save the lives of people inside. We also ventilate for firefighter access. Again, if we can get the firefighters inside, they can get closer to the seat of the fire and better extinguish the fire that way. So firefighter access, very important reason for ventilation. We also ventilate to control the spread of fire. Strip ventilation, very effective firefighting tool. We also ventilate to prevent a backdraft condition. This condition you see right here, this structure right here is a potential backdraft building. Look at those windows. The windows are not plywood, that's smoke. They're hot. If you should enter this building from the ground level, you have a potential of backdraft condition at this structure. It's important that everybody recognizes these symptoms or these signals. You roll up this building and the windows will be hot. They can be puffing smoke around the cracks. The smoke is quite often a grayish-yellow color. These are all symptoms of backdraft. Again, the only way to avert this is by roof ventilation. Backdraft has been called a static condition. What has happened inside, the fire has consumed most of the oxygen, and it's burning with less intensity. All it needs is oxygen. Again, if you open the thing from the ground level, then that'll give it the oxygen necessary, and it will backdraft. The only way to avert this is, say, with roof ventilation, get the heat and smoke out from the top, and then go in from the bottom side. So it's a timed attack. This is not the time to think about ventilation. If you don't have your act together before you get to this point, then you better stay back on the ground. Having a game plan is vitally important to effective, efficient ventilation. What do you do on a single-family dwelling? What do you look at when you roll up this fire? Are you aware of the smoke conditions, where the fire is? Very important that you size this building up. What are you doing on commercials? When you roll into this commercial fire, are you looking at the smoke colors, condition of the smoke? When you roll up there and you see a sign that says Acme Dynamite Company, you'll fight that fire differently than Joe's Ironworks. It's important to know what's inside of this building. It's important to know what the occupancy type is. Hotels. How you fight a fire in a hotel is very important as far as saving lives and effectively fighting this fire. On your common attic commercials, we have these types of structures throughout the city, series of commercial structures. You can fight that fire with a game plan and quite often save it to 1 or 2 units, or you can lose the entire block. It's important to have a game plan for various types of fires. Okay, a truckman does more than just go up the roof and beat a hole in the roof. He has reasons for his hole. This particular hole is a heat hole. As you can see, it's placed directly over the fire room, and it lets the heat and smoke out, maybe gives firefighter access. Same as for attics. Gets the heat and smoke out of the structure, allows the firefighters to go inside, put the fire out. This is a heat hole. The other basic type of hole we will be talking about is a strip ventilation hole. Just consider this as a fire break in a roof. It's just the same as you're up in the brush with a bulldozer and you cut a big path in the brush. The strip ventilation hole is a hole in the roof that just the fire will burn up to that hole, and quite often it'll stop right there. Strip ventilation, if done properly, is a very effective firefighting tool. As you can see by this fire here, the fire's on one side of the strip ventilation hole, burns right up and burns out the hole. Again, it's a very good tool. We sometimes also ventilate exposures. Like the center building there is fully involved, or was fully involved. If you can put a ventilation hole in the exposure building, you can quite often relieve the heat and smoke and the products of combustion from the exposure building and save that structure. Let's get to our basic type of buildings, single-family dwellings. And your size up is vitally important to you. I'm not talking about the size up to OCD. I'm talking about the firefighter size up. Everybody makes a size up when they roll up to a structure fire. It's important that you locate the fire as soon as possible. If you're a truckman and you want to get a hole as close as you can to the fire, it's important you know where that fire is. When you roll up to the right side of this structure, roll past the structure, look down the sides, look in the windows. Again, try to locate the fire as soon as you can. That'll affect your laddering. You want to ladder away from the fire. So as soon as you can locate the fire, the better off you are. When you're running down the side of the building with your ladder, look at attic vents. That's a clue to attic involvement. Very important to know what's going on inside the attic. Of course, it's obvious if you see a one-room blowout, that makes it pretty easy to know where to place your hole. You're on the roof, pretty simple. That's an easy one there. It's not always that easy. Quite often on flat roofs, whether they be commercials, houses, apartment houses, you can't see which room is involved. If you can look over the parapet, you can quite often spot which room is involved. It's important to get that hole as close as you can over the fire, again, with safety allowances. This is a very common occurrence on roofs like this. It's a shingle roof. The fire is burnt through the shingles. The fire hasn't actually burnt through the rafters yet, but the shingles are burnt through, and it looks pretty dangerous. If you'd laddered this structure away from the fire, felt the unburned roof, the good roof, then walk yourself over to where you feel comfortable, as close as you can over the seat of the fire, start your hole, and end up back at the ladder or the safety area. Again, always work from the uninvolved to the involved and work yourself back towards the uninvolved area. As you can see here, the firefighters were able to work directly over the fire, and they did it safely and end up back at your ladder, get back down. Okay, as you can see here again, laddering. Laddered away from the fire room, you have access to the roof. This is a condition you'll see quite often on these kind of dwelling fires. The smoke comes out of the attic vents, the windows. It'll roll right up the roof line and totally engulf the roof. Say right now there's 4 firefighters working on this roof. As you can see, if you didn't have a game plan on how to cut this roof, you'd be kind of at a loss. Once you get some ventilation going, once you get your first hole started, then the roof becomes very tenable, and it's easy to work up there. This just happens to be my crew, and there's my auto fireman cutting. I was pulling that day, and again, once we got some primary ventilation going, the rest of that roof opened up pretty easy. And as you see, we had fairly good ventilation on that roof. Again, it's important to know or have a game plan prior to walking across these roofs and attempting to cut a hole. The key, bottom line to roof ventilation is rafter direction. If you can determine how the roof is built, you can cut it. Keep in mind you cut parallel to rafters, because rafters are covered with sheeting, whether it be 1x6 sheeting or plywood sheeting. That's crossways to the rafters, and you're merely going to be cutting off the sheeting of the structure rather than cutting deeper. So if you keep in mind cut parallel to rafters, then I don't care how it's built, whether it be 1x6 sheeted or even plywood sheeting. There are just various techniques you're going to use to open this roof. Let's talk briefly now about one of our problems on our dwellings, And that's our modern construction. And I say modern, I mean in the last 20 to 25 years, we have truss roofs, in particular gang nail plated truss roofs. This roof is constructed at the factory. These trusses are made up. They're attached, put together with gang nail plates. Now, the gang nail plate is probably when it's at the factory or when it's engineered out, is stronger than a couple of 16s. It's an engineered roof. It has a lot of strength prior to any fire involvement. As you can see here, these little nails are about 3/8 of an inch long, and they're probably prior to fire involvement, they're as strong as a couple of 16s. We found out in a burn test we did that when about a minute to a minute and a half of direct flame impingement, those plates will come right out. The heat sinks down the little nail, it chars the wood, and very short period of time that plate's going to come off there. And that's all that's holding that roof together, that truss together. So it's important that we recognize these roofs. Again, we talk about what are we going to do? Are we not going to fight fire in modern buildings, or are we going to have a game plan and recognize these conditions and act accordingly? I think probably the answer is recognition of a lightweight roof. You would operate differently on a gang nail plated truss roof as you would an older styled 1x6 sheeted with 2x6 rafters. It's important that you recognize that. When you roll up to the structure and start laddering it, look at the eaves. Look at the rafters overhanging the eave. That's your clue. If you see 2x4s, I would at least be aware of the fact that's a possibility of being in fact, a good possibility of being a gang nail plated truss roof. And you're going to work further away from the fire. With that minute and a half, 2 minutes of burn time on the gang nail plates, I'm certainly going to allow a lot more unburned area between me and the fire. So it's a consideration. Okay, like everything else, there's a catch to this truss roof sometimes. Sometimes on these buildings, they will scab in a piece of 2x6. This will be on the front eave of the house only, and it's just there for pretty. So sometimes you'll see a 2x6 eave, and if it's a modern house built in the last, say 10, 12 years, be aware of the fact that it still could be a gang nail plated truss and act accordingly. Let's talk now a little bit about hotels. Okay, these are very common in the downtown part of our city. We look at this building and say, gee, how much fire could I have in an old brick building? Probably not a heck of a lot, except that as we know in history, we've had some pretty fair fires at hotels. This just happens to be the Pone Square fire, and of course, we know after the Pone Square fire that they passed an ordinance, that Pone Square ordinance, that made all the buildings enclose their stair shafts and hallways. So nowadays, we couldn't have a fire like this. It's impossible. Except if you ever worked in this area, you know that the Pone doors are generally open, and we could still have a fire of this magnitude even with the Pone Square ordinance. So what are we going to do? What's the problem on these things? Looking at the hotel, no matter which floor the fire is on, the fire can go up those stair shafts. It'll bank down the hallway on the upper floors, mushrooming itself back down. The smoke is killing the people. Little old lady on the 5th floor opens her door. It's wall-to-wall hot black smoke. She walks down the hallway, dies in the hall, or goes back in her room, closes the door, leaves it open, whatever, and jumps out the window. That's what's killing the people. It isn't the fire as much as it is the smoke in the halls. Okay, what kind of a game plan do we have for hotel fires? First in truck should get their aerial to the roof, and roof crew goes to the roof. First thing they look for is your penthouses and skylights. Open the penthouse door and see what comes out. If heavy smoke comes out, that means you have problems. You have stairway involvement, and you should be aware of that. Also, slide your skylights out. Again, skylights will be over the stair shafts or over the center hallways, and that's your clue. You might want to cut some more roof in conjunction with just having your skylights pulled. You might want to center hallway ventilate to give you additional ventilation if you have heavy hallway involvement. Again, it's keeping the hallways tenable is what's going to save the lives of the people in those rooms. Of course, if the fire was on the top floor, and which they very rarely are, it seems like, get a hole over the fire room, you might then need to do strip ventilation across the attic. That's pretty simple then, but generally they seem to be below the top floor, and it's more of a problem to you. This series of pictures here is there to show a series of windows. Again, your size up is pretty important to you. Your size up when you roll up to this thing. If you see a series of windows like this, that's going to be your center hallways. Then your primary hole should be over your hallways to get those hallways tenable. If you roll up there and you see the fire escape at the right-hand side is not showing any fire or any smoke, then again, your hallways aren't a problem to you. But look down to your left-hand side and you can see smoke in the attic. The attic's got some fire involved in it. Smoke in fire in those rooms back there. Okay, so your first holes of this particular fire will be over the rooms rather than the hallways. First in truck placed a hole over the fire room. You can look down inside there and see the burnt out room. They widened their hole one time, as you can see here. Then they said, well, gee, the fire is going that good. Let's give it a center hallway cut. So apparently they cut over the hallway, and you can see by this char around the edge of the hole right there that you know, they did have some pretty good fire heat in the hallway. Then the same guy says, hey, this fire is going pretty good in the attic. Let's do a strip ventilation hole across this roof. They started their strip ventilation hole. I guess about that time they declared a knockdown, probably due to the center hallway hole, give the firemen access. So what we have here is 3 different holes in the same roof, done by the same guys. To me, that is really heads-up thinking truck work. They had a heat ventilation hole, put the heat out of the fire room. They had a fireman access hole in the hallway to give fireman access. Plus, they did a defensive hole to stop the horizontal spread of fire. 3 different holes, same roof. Pretty good truck work, I think. Okay, let's take a few minutes now for a short intermission, talk about the lessons we've learned so far. Be back in a few minutes. Welcome back from your break. I hope it was beneficial. Let's talk now about strip ventilation. As we talked about earlier, strip ventilation is merely a fire break in the roof of a structure. If done properly, it's a very effective tool for stopping the horizontal spread of fire. Some things to consider when you do strip ventilation is you need a primary hole over the fire, or as close as you can over the fire. This will allow you time to complete your strip. And as you can see by the depth of char on the right side of this hole, the strip ventilation hole will work. Again, it's a matter of timing, doing it in the proper sequence. The left side, relatively little char, and heavy char on the sheeting on the right-hand side. Okay, we talked about earlier, again, the size up is very important. It's also important that you recognize different roof types from the street. If you can roll up to this structure and determine the rafter direction while you're still in the apparatus, then that's a big benefit to you. The more roofs you can identify from the street, the better off you are. When you come up to the structure here, respond into it, you look at that building, You say, well, gee, that's a double arch rib truss roof, rafters going the long way of the building, sheeting's going this or that. That makes your job when you get on that roof, if it's on fire, a lot easier. It saves you one less thing to worry about, and that's rafter direction. When you got inside there, you realize double arch truss, rafters going the long way. Very simple. Once you've determined rafter direction, the rest of cutting the roof is just a mechanical act. Which technique do you want to use? This is one of my favorite types of roofs, the arch rib roof. One of the reasons why I like this roof for ventilation is the fact I know rafter direction. It's a heavy timbered roof and has rafters going the long way of the building. It'll either be diagonally sheeted, 1x6 sheeting, either diagonally or straight sheeted. Again, once you've determined that, the act of cutting the roof is very simple. A truckman needs to develop an X-ray vision. He never sees the roof from the inside, he sees it from the top side. He has to be able to analyze, look at this roof from the top and see what it looks like. When you look at this roof here, this is what you see from the inside. The big arches, they're spaced 12, 15, 20 feet apart, and in between those arches will be your rafters going the long way of the building. Very simple. There is variations of the arch rib. We'll call this a bridge truss roof. All they have is it's the same basic format, but instead of the arches, they've merely bolted some big trusses together. Again, you can see the rafters going the long way. You can also see the sheeting going across the rafters. All you're after in ventilation is cutting through that sheeting. Another variation, this again is a type of a bridged truss roof. As you can see, bolted together, sheeting going across the rafters, rafters going a long way of the building. Very simple once you've determined that. In any industrial part of town, you'll find a series of commercial roofs. They can be arch ribs, bridge truss roofs, buildings side by side. There's a potential for a fire in one spreading to the next building or the next building over. You need a firefighting plan to fight fires in this type of occupancies. What's going to happen is, say, like the building with the ventilators on it, maybe that's where they saw up the wood for the furniture. Maybe the next building over might be where they assemble it. Next one over is where they're going to package it or warehouse it. What they have in between these buildings is big rolling steel or sliding steel fire doors. That is your exposure problem. If you have fire in one, it can very easily communicate from one building to the next. So you need a plan to fight a fire in this type of a occupancy. Here's a good example of one we had a few years back. The fire started in the first building, lower end, went through the door there to the next building, to the next building, to the next building, and they finally stopped the fire at the last building there. And here's your problem. Rolling steel, sliding steel fire doors. Of course, we all know they're on fusible links, automatically self-closing. Of course, the guy that stacks that pallet of stuff in front of the door, he doesn't realize that. They're kind of like the pony doors. You can figure they're going to be open and don't guarantee on the fact the door is going to close automatically. So what are you going to do? How are you going to fight a fire in this type of a structure? What is your game plan? We're talking about strip ventilation over the fire door. Ideally, if you can get on the building that's on fire, the main fire building, then that's good. Get a hole over the fire door in the involved building. Quite often that building might be too far gone to be on top of. So at least on the exposure building, get a hole over the fire door. I'm sure your next question is, well, gee, how do I know where that fire door is? There's a few ways of determining. You can do smoke indicator holes, which we'll talk about later on this package. Or just try to analyze the building. If it's a very long building, they're not going to have a door right inside of the front door. The doors will be spaced maybe at the 1/3 point or the halfway point. This would be where I would start looking for a door. If the building is heavily exposed, again, look at your ventilators on top of the roof. If it's puffing pretty heavy and you realize that building is a potential, if there is an exposure problem there, I would advocate cutting it one end to the other if you have to. It's a lot easier to replace a little roof than lose the entire structure. There is ways of determining, say with smoke indicator holes, approximately where the fire doors are. You need some holes over that. Here's an example one that was done last year in Los Angeles, downtown. The roof itself was untenable. They were unable to get on top of the roof because of potential roof collapse. The guys did a strip ventilation hole in the back of the structure, and there's a building to the left of you that was severely exposed, and they're able to keep the fire from spreading. You need guys inside of the building behind there, the exposure building, but a strip ventilation hole in the roof is a big benefit to you. Okay, we talked about earlier about common attic fires. These are, say, throughout the city you have this type of an occupancy. You get a fire in one unit and it'll spread in that attic and it might burn 2 or 3 or a series of units down. So what kind of a game plan are you looking at? What we're talking about is if we can get a hole over the fire, ventilate the fire building itself, and then fall back to the exposure to either side of it, and get a strip in the roof, a line inside, and you can stop it to that unit. That's sometimes easier said than done, but here's an example of one. The first hole was over the fire, had a small hole over the fire. They then went and put a strip on each side of the hole of the fire room. As you can see, that strip's a little bit crooked. What happened on this particular roof was that the roof was solid smoke and vertigo sets in. The guys are actually kind of walking around in circles, kind of having a hard time going straight. They were able to perform a strip on each side of the involved occupancy, and the fire stopped right there. If done properly, it does work. Okay, let's talk about some lightweight roofs. Again, recognition from the street is pretty important to you. If you come up to the structure here and you see the lift slab construction, external pilasters, that should trigger in your head possibility of a lightweight roof. It could be panelized, it could be lightweight trusses, but you're going to act differently on a lightweight roof compared to a heavy timber roof. With a lightweight roof, you won't be working directly over the fire. You're going to write off more roof. You're going to be giving the fire some roof because they burn through so readily. So recognition of this is important. Look at the pilaster. If I was going to ladder this building now, I would ladder the pilaster. There's a 50-50 chance if you ladder that pilaster that there's going to be a heavy timber on the other side of that thing. And in later years, they also did lift slabs. These are probably a little more modern type of buildings. Then they just poured the joint between the two, and that's still, you know, a trigger, a clue that that's going to be a lift slab construction building, lightweight roof probably. Then in again later years, the more modern ones, all they have is a little seam. On the seams, they lift the slabs up, they welded the pieces together, put in a ledger plate. On these buildings, we're advocating laddering 8 feet from the corner. You say, why 8 feet from the corner? At 8 foot from the corner is a 50-50 chance of walking on purlins. Again, when you're working on lightweight roofs, you've got to know what you're working on prior to going over across this roof and doing your ventilation. You can't operate there unless you know how it's built. If you ladder 8 feet from the corner, there's a 50-50 chance of stepping off of the ladder onto a purlin. Again, on the block wall buildings, it's impossible to tell how this thing is made. You figure because of the age of construction, it's going to be lightweight. This one here happens to be a panelized roof. So again, laddering 8 feet from the corner would increase your chances of stepping off your parapet onto a solid beam. Let's talk about panelized roofs. We have a lot of them in the city. It's important that you understand and recognize how this building is built and how this roof is constructed. You cannot operate on this roof safely unless you understand how it's built. Against the wall you see the internal pilasters. That's where your lam beams, your beams are secured. They can be spaced anywhere from say 12 to around 40 feet, so that's kind of a variable for you. But in between those will be your purlins. Now your purlins are 8 feet apart. They're exactly 8 feet apart, 8 feet on centers. And that's an important measurement to keep in your mind when you're up there testing that roof. If you pick up an 8-foot pattern, pick up heavy timber on an 8-foot pattern, you're most likely, or almost always going to be on a panelized roof. That's your big clue. And in between the purlins will be 2x4s on 2 feet centers. Remember that type of roof. Memorize how that thing goes, because you can't cut it unless you understand how it's made. My beam of choice for walking on a panelized roof will be my girder or lam beam. It's secured to the pilaster by a heavy metal strap. When I'm on that roof, that's going to be a plenty strong enough beam. And I talk about when I'm on that roof. If I'm on that roof and I'm working directly over the fire, I'm in the wrong spot. I will not operate on a panelized roof directly over the fire. So when I'm on that roof, that's going to be a good beam to be on. My next beam of choice will be the purlin. When I'm on the purlin, it's a heavy timbered beam. It's also hung in pretty strong with those big heavy metal hangers. As you can see, the hanger is heavy steel. It's nailed in securely to the lam beam, also nailed in heavily to the purlin. That beam is very strong. The lesser choice of beams to be on, which I won't walk on, is 2x4s. 2x4's got a real thin galvanized hanger, maybe one nail into end grain. It's laid across the purlins. If they nail it, that's good. If not, quite often they're not even nailed. We did a survey of a building that was burned down a few years back, and we found that 40% of the 2x4s, the little plate right there, was not nailed to the purlin. That's not the beam that I want to be on. These things are pre-nailed to the decking. They're forklifted up to the roof. They're thrown on relatively fast. The guy walks by with a nail gun attached to his boot and walks down there punching nails in there. It goes up really fast once the skeleton is up. The decking is very flimsy sometimes. This is what it looks like from the top side of a panelized roof. Quite often you can see the waffle effect of the beams. The roof will kind of settle around those lam beams. This is also an indicator of where your lam beams are. Very important that you know that. When you're walking across that lam beam, you're testing with your rubbish hook or your pike pole. You can sound and listen for the purlins. Another good clue would be your skylights. Your skylights will be 4x8. Again, once you can identify an 8-foot pattern, your purlins will be on either end of the skylight. It's very important that you can identify this roof from the top side. Also look for air conditioning units. They will generally always be on the lam beams. It's a good indicator of lam beams. It's important that you understand this roof. Okay, let's take a few minutes and discuss some panelized roofs, discuss some of your lightweight roofs. You might even have to, on the blackboard, draw out the typical skeleton of a panelized roof. Again, it's very important at this time that you understand how this roof is constructed. Okay, let's talk a little bit about laddering and some of our safety considerations. First in truck, ladders the building. Put a ladder on the one side. They'll also try to ladder the other side of the structure, so they have at least 2 ladders up. Then they proceed up the roof and start their roof operations. What I'm advocating is if you're the second or the third in truck to a structure fire, Put lots of ladders up to the structure to help the other guys off. Try to anticipate what's going to be needed prior to them needing it. If you're working on a roof, there's nothing wrong with having a couple ladders to a structure. Think about getting the guys off that roof prior to them needing it. Think about getting 2 ladders to that corner. Just imagine yourself, you're on this roof, maybe the first in truck has 4 or 5 guys up there working. Second in truck gets up there, they climb up your ladders, so then there's maybe, say, 10 guys on this roof. All of a sudden the roof gets a little shaky and everybody wants to get off. Here you are, 10 guys waiting in line for 1 ladder. So when you come up to a structure fire, start throwing additional ladders up to it. Get that thing well laddered so that everybody can get off the roof as fast as they can if necessary. Again, plan your escape before you need it. Anticipate what that roof's going to look like if it starts to collapse on you. Very important. When you're stepping off the parapet, stepping off your ladder, very important you feel that roof. See other guys stepping off, feel the roof. That's your first indication of what that roof is going to be like. You can tell if it's going to be plywood quite often. You can tell if it's burnt through underneath you. Feel that roof. Your hand now should be hanging on that rung, so in case something gives away on you, it's going to support you. Don't ever jump off a parapet. And I'm talking about if you're drilling, practicing, no matter what you're doing, get in the habit of stepping off a parapet, hanging on to your ladder, and feeling the roof prior to putting your full body weight on it. That could save your life. Again, you might want to test with a rubbish hook, a pike pole. That is your first indication of what you're working on. It's also your first clue as to what the good roof feels like. If you've laddered properly and you've laddered away from the fire, that's what the good roof feels like. When you get to where it may be a little bit soft or spongy, you should be able to correlate the two and say, hey, this is not where I want to be, or this is okay. So you should know what it feels like, you know, away from the fire. Traditionally in the past, they used to tell us the parapet is always the safest place to be. In modern buildings with plywood roofs, this is not always the case. We have found that the fire sometimes will hit the ceiling level, burn across the ceiling, hit a wall, and that's where the largest damage is to the roof. So quite often, right next to your parapet is burnt through and unsafe. This particular firefighter here is walking on a ledger plate only. There's no wood underneath him at all. He's working strictly on tar paper. When you're walking down a parapet, walk the parapet, stay in line, test as you go. Everybody kind of follows the leader. The parapet is still a very safe place to be. Walk down your parapet on a lightweight roof. Now you might want to walk the parapet till you find a lam beam, and then go over to your the site of placing your hole on the beams. But your parapet is a definite refuse area. Walk them carefully, being aware of the fact that they could be burnt through next to the parapet. If you're testing as you go, you shouldn't have any problems. When I walk across a roof, I'm also testing, but I'm also bouncing. It looks like I've got this little nervous twitch to me. I'm bouncing along, and what I'm doing is I'm springing the roof. If I've done that over by my parapet where I was the unburned or uninvolved areas, I know what the good roof bounce is like. When I get over to where where maybe a little bit soft, where the fire might be, I can compare the two. The fireman's feet are probably one of his most important tools of his body. Listen to your feet. Those are the things that are actually connected to the roof all the time. If the roof starts to collapse, if it starts to settle and sag on you, what's the first thing going to tell you? It's your feet. Keep your feet in tune to your brain at all times. Very important part of a truckman is his feet. Okay, when you're testing on a lightweight roof, say you're walking across the lam beam there, when you come across a purlin, it's going to sound like hitting that rubbish hook right on concrete. It's very easy to tell when you're testing, pounding along there, rubbish hook out in front of you. You can tell when you're walking on the heavy beams. And for my money, I want to walk on basically lam beams or beams and purlins. Very important. Okay, we talked about smoke indicator holes. I think on a panelized roof or a lightweight roof, they should be mandatory. Again, we don't, at least I don't operate directly over the seat of the fire if I'm on a lightweight roof. This is how you're going to determine whether you're over the fire or not. When you ladder that building away from the fire, go out a few feet away from the parapet and place a little inspection hole. It can be a little kerf cut with this, so the blade of your chainsaw. It can be a little diamond-shaped hole, an axe hole, whatever. This is going to help you know what's happening down inside the structure. When you're on a regular type of fire, say a heavier timbered roof, it'll help you determine where the best spot to place your hole is going to be. Now, for my money, I don't really need a giant, large hole. A little small hole, just the width of your chainsaw, is all that's really necessary. It shouldn't be big enough where you should, fall into, or somebody, fall into the hole or draw the fire over to you. That isn't necessary. All you're after is involvement down below you, whether it's heavy smoke, heavy fire, whatever. This is what you really need. On a panelized roof or lightweight roof, plywood roofs, you can just use the pick of your axe. Send the pick of your axe in the roof, while it around a little bit. All of a sudden, you got a little small smoke indicator hole. This will tell you if that thing blows bright red fire, then maybe you're in the wrong spot. Your axe also works quite well. In about 3 swings with the axe, you can have a pretty good sized hole, plenty big enough to indicate smoke or fire in that roof. This works very well. Quite often I'll do that with my crew. If I'm up there, they're chopping a hole in a certain area, I'll be floating around other parts of the roof and doing little inspection holes to determine which direction the fire is traveling, how much involvement we have. They're a very effective tool. If you're on a panelized roof, be aware that they can be aluminized foil underneath them, insulation, and you might want to bust through with the handle of your axe just to make sure that you're actually getting a true reading on the space in there. That's what you're looking at. If you see lazy smoke coming out of the hole, that might be an indicator that the building is exposed. There is some smoke coming through someplace. If while you're up there, though, it changes just to puffing smoke, gets pretty heavy smoke coming out of that hole, that should indicate something to you. Of course, if it changes color, turns black, again, those are more indicators of heavy involvement. And of course, if you do that and it blows red on you, that's a pretty good clue. That's either the spot to be or not to be. If you're on a lightweight roof, that's the wrong spot. Look down inside your hole and see what's happening inside that structure. Very important. Let's talk now about plywood. Say in the last 15, 20 years, almost all you're going to get for your decking material is plywood. Plywood has some very unusual burning characteristics. At a fire, it'll burn off a layer at a time. Some of our buildings have as low as 3/8 3-ply plywood. That means it can burn away 3 layers, then expose the tar paper. The tar paper is exposed. For some reason, it doesn't burn through at the same time as the plywood. Now, this firefighter here is walking on a rafter. There's no wood underneath him at all. He's walking strictly on tar paper. Again, if he wasn't testing as he was going, he could very easily fall through the roof and get burned. Here's what we're talking about. Tar paper, layer at a time, the plywood at a layer at a time, burns away, exposes the next layer, that flakes away the same way, and all of a sudden, all you have is hot tar paper, which is not enough to walk on, for sure. Okay, saggy roofs. This is an obvious one right here, of course. When you're on a roof, sometimes you're over there chopping your hole. Quite often, the roof will give you an indication that it's in trouble, it's coming in on you. It'll creak, it'll groan, it'll settle. That is your clue to get off that roof. Listen to the roof, feel it. Again, that's where your sensitive feet are very important to you. If it starts to collapse, it starts to settle on you, don't pull any more boards. You're going to have plenty of ventilation pretty quick. Scurry off to a parapet and get yourself off that roof. Also look for growing vent pipes. Of course, if vent pipes don't grow, the roof settles on you. Again, that's a clue that this roof is starting to lose its integrity. Now, be aware of these conditions. Be aware of your surroundings when you're working on a roof. Okay, one of the things that I advocate is I like to know my rafter direction and sheeting direction prior to getting over to where I'm going to place my hole. As we talked about with the arch rib roofs, that's pretty easy to read. You know rafter direction while you're still in the apparatus. On flat roofs, that's impossible. You roll up there, and some of the flat roofs we can guess, but you can't always be sure. What we're saying to do is to open up a little section of this tar paper and expose some of the roof. It just takes a little bit of a triangle cut. Again, do this off of your ladder, where you were laddered to the parapet, nice safe area, not over the fire, and pop that little plug out of there, and that'll tell you how the roof is built. Okay, now we know this is 1x6 sheeted, and the sheeting is going crossways to and the rafters are going crossways to the sheeting. Pretty simple now. You can go across this roof and intelligently cut that roof. The same thing can be done by the first guy that hits the roof, the first guy that gets over the parapet with your axe. Just a few quick little cuts will go right through that tar paper, scrape out some of the tar paper, and look. Okay, now you can cut this roof intelligently. If it's diagonally sheeted, that's important to know. If you see that it's diagonally sheeted, you ought to know that. Pretty important. Another way of determining the sheeting direction is with your axe. All you have to do is hit your axe into the roof, and if it bounces off, then that's going crossways to the grain of the sheeting. If you hit it again at a 45-degree angle and it sinks in, then that's going with the grain. And basically, as far as cutting a roof, all you're interested in is cutting through that sheeting. This will help you determine rafter direction and sheeting direction. Sometimes if you're on a lightweight roof, you can't tell what it is. If you're on this roof, you're testing, you can't find purlins. This is when you want to do a diagonal cut and expose some of the roofing members to determine what it is. And it's important to know what you're working on prior to getting out to where you want to put your hole. Diagonal cut until you actually hit a piece of wood, hit something in there. Expose that piece of wood, board, whatever it is, and have a look at it. Again, it's important to know what you're working on. You have to reach in there and feel it. You're away from your fire area. Reach in there and feel and look at that board. It's important to know. If you reached in your hole there and you found a 2x4 and it was on edge, it could be a panelized roof, and somewhere parallel to that should be a land beam. Of course, if you can't find that land beam, then it's a possibility it could be something else. It could be this roof right here. This is a very dangerous roof. This is your ganglion-plated truss roof. Again, you should be aware of that. That's important to know. If you reached in that hole or looked in that hole and you found a flat 2x4, could be open web truss. Again, you're going to fight these fires differently. You're going to operate differently on these roofs from one roof to the other. Could be your plywood truss. Again, these are all things you should know prior to walking out to where the fire is. Very important. Okay, ventilators. Ventilators are kind of a fireman's friend. They can do the same thing as a little smoke indicator hole in your roof. It'll tell you what's happening inside. Use them, but don't abuse them. I've been to a number of fires where some aggressive truckman decides he wants to knock that ventilator off to increase his hole size, and he beats and he crams and he hits it, and generally speaking, the average truckman is smart enough and strong enough he can knock that thing off. He works at it hard enough. He'll beat it, and he gets that thing off, and all of a sudden he's got less of a hole. Right now he's got about a third of the ventilation hole. Now the ventilator isn't ventilating. If that thing's spinning, it's actually drawing smoke and heat out of that attic. Here's a good example. This is the armory fire. The ventilator at your right is ventilating pretty good. The one to your left was knocked off, and it's not doing as good. Okay, use the ventilator to help you read your attic, read your space inside. That'll tell you what's happening inside. Here's another good picture from the armory fire. You can see that ventilator to your left is bright red, showing fire. Pretty good involvement underneath there. But the other ventilator is not doing anything. It's not even spinning. What does that tell you? Probably there's a division wall inside the structure. The fire's on one side, not on the other. That's a good clue as to attic involvement, what's happening inside this structure. Use them. Skylights, I call them my quick and dirty ventilation. They're readily available, easy to do, easy to pull. Problem is sometimes they're too easy. Have you ever been on a structure and you're over the fire area, you're maybe pulled some skylights, you're cutting some roof, and all of a sudden, back by your ladder off this roof, some guy pulls some skylights and totally blows you off the roof. Smoke's going your direction. It'll totally destroy you. It'll suck fire from the fire area over to that skylight and cause all kinds of problems. Use your skylights as you would use a hole. Start from the uninvolved, go across your roof, pull some skylights as close as you can to the fire. You might want to cut some roof in between your skylights. Back off, pull more skylights, cut more roof. Again, back yourself back off to your safety ladder. Don't just go up to a roof and indiscriminately start pulling off skylights. The old rule of thumb still applies. If you look inside your skylight and see bright red, then you can go ahead and break it on through. Otherwise, you might want to just slide it off, flip the entire assembly, whatever's your best operation. Skylights do ventilate pretty fair. There's one doing a pretty good job of ventilating. You also might want to cut some roof in between your skylights. There's nothing at all wrong with pulling some skylights, cutting some roof, and again, using that as part of your ventilation hole. Know what your skylight ventilates. If you're on apartment house fire and you wanted attic ventilation, don't bother pulling your skylights off. They're not going to ventilate the attic. That'll ventilate the stair shafts. If you wanted stair shaft ventilation, sure, pull your skylights off. That's your most readily available ventilation for stair shafts. Know what they ventilate prior to pulling them off or breaking them. Hatch covers, they're kind of the same category as skylights. If it's convenient over the fire in a good spot, go ahead and pull it. If it's not, leave it alone. It'll draw fire if you don't. If it's pulled off in the wrong area of the roof, it can and will draw fire over to it. Your 1.5-inch protective line is a super tool for a roof team. It's used to control smoke, control the heat. You can pull a lot more boards with 1.5 inches on the roof than you can without it. It's also an excellent safety line. A guy gets hot tar splashed on him, sticks his foot through the roof someplace. It's a good safety line, but it's not intended to put the fire out with. Problem lies in the fact that a lot of our younger firefighters, truckie chops a hole in the roof, guy sees the fire coming out, and he says, boy, I'll put that fire out really easy. If you do that, you take a good chance of severely burning some guys inside. Just be super aware of what you're doing, and it's used for smoke control, heat control. It's not intended to put the fire out. That concludes our lecture for today. In the very near future, we plan on having some more tapes on the actual how to ventilate, the hands-on, you have a chainsaw in your hand, how you can cut this roof. So for now, let's discuss what we've learned, bone up on some of the areas of we talked about, and we'll be back in the future with some more tapes.